around 15 minutes for the questions and answers. The first question is addressed to all the panelists. What is the official epidemic declaration in your country? How many people, patients? Did your country reach this number with COVID-19 and when? And it's from Judith Golzan. I don't know who, maybe Professor Kaiser, would you like to start answer? Sorry.
I didn't understand the question correctly.
The question is, what is the official definition threshold to declare epidemic, the pandemic, in terms of number of patients, number of cases, yeah.
As far as I know, there is no official there is no official threshold, or there is no definition. It's more that the national law is close to the WHO law, and the WHO has already declared that pandemic, and so has the German Bundestag. So it more or less probably follows what the Robert Koch Institute says, and if the Robert Koch Institute, that's our big knowledge infrastructure on the pandemic, if they say there is still that pandemic danger, so the Bundestag will follow that that evaluation.
Okay, in Turkey, do you have any exact number?
Yeah, asking me, I don't know the exact number.
Okay, what is the case in Hungary?
In Hungary, we don't have an automatized model with exact numbers. In Hungary, it's a procedural rule that the chief medical officer, who is the head of the National Public Health Institute, recommends the introduction of the pandemic emergency to the government, and the government will decide on the basis of the recommendation. So only procedural rules and no thresholds and no automatizations.
Okay, so let me to put this question in a broader context. You know that there is guidelines how to manage epidemic, and it's based in all European countries based on the WHO guideline, and it starts with preparation for the risk of epidemic, and also the first step, when only one case is discovered, the intervention to prevent the spread of the cases, to prevent a pandemic, is necessary to start. So we have to see the picture from this wider approach. So our second question, and is addressed Professor Hoffman. How would you assess the future development in Hungary? How long will be borders closed? And how does the population feel about the restrictions, accept them? And the question is from David Schreiber.
Thank you very much. But as a lawyer, I can predict, and I can talk about the society. On the legal regulation, it is a definite and indefinite one, because these restrictions can be introduced by the so-called epidemic, the emergency epidemic danger, for a limited time, but it can be lengthened by the government. So to have the same mention like 1 minute ago. If the chief medical officer will give a recommendation to the government and the government will decide to lengthen, to have a longer time for border closure, it will be decided. And it's very, very interesting because one of the limitations of that is the European Union law. It was an interesting case on behalf of the Hungarian border restrictions and traveling restrictions, because public health issue is just an exception in the European Union law. So shortly, I don't know. But perhaps Professor Orosz, you could have some research on the reactions of the society, but as a lawyer, I can't predict it.
Not really research, empirical research, but many publications, and we see a very interesting picture that the population followed more the restriction in spring, and then the summer changed quite considerably, and now we have more complex picture and different attitude from different group of the society, and also some groups that even question the existence of the pandemic, and deny the restrictions. It's a small but vocal group in social media, and we have a risk that when the vaccine is coming, there will be again a very mixed attitude from the population side. And also, I would say that currently the government restrictions are very weak compared to the danger of the pandemic. So there are considerable group of experts and also the population who think that the restriction would be stronger, for example, concerning the gathering, concerning open football match, and also now the question is more not the severe restriction, the concern is about the inadequate restriction, and this concern is shared by experts and also considerable group of the population. Okay, so our next question is from Laura Colon. Do you think the measure adopted by governments in order to face the coronavirus will have an effect on European democratic values, and this crisis will come to an end? If your answer yes or no, so that's the question. I think to all the panelists, the possible impact on European democratic values. So first, can I invite Professor Kaiser?
You're muted.
From a German perspective, I mean, as for the German laws, there is it has no impact on the European democratic values. So the European democratic values are upheld.
Okay, Professor Gexel.
Okay, so actually the answer would be yes, but I don't have much information about the democratic values. I mean, I much look at the economic perspective of the COVID-19, so maybe I can just say yes, but I don't know the details. But there's one question for me. I can answer that question from Professor Soranio. Thanks for your question. He is asking, is there a comparison between the flu and COVID-19? That's because important because we expect a huge number of patients for flu in winter, as he said. But up to my knowledge in Turkey, actually, there is no formal comparison between flu and COVID-19 as to determine the threshold level. So I don't know that information, but yes, he is once again right. There are two big issues in that issue. The health part of this perspective and the economy perspective. So the governments are deciding. It is hard to decide because on one hand we have the health, which is very important. On the other hand, there's an economy. It's also very important. In Turkey, as much in many countries in Europe as well, from March to mid-June, actually the health part was dominant in Turkey. But after mid-June, since the economy is contracting much, so the government, of course, decided to give some decisions. And after mid-June, I believe the economy part is dominating the health part. So all the decisions are given to that. But I don't know what is going to happen in winter because as you just mentioned that in winter, we also expect to flu and how I don't know how it's going to spread with this COVID-19. So maybe once again, the governments should take account this, and maybe the health and economy parts should be reallocated once again. Thank you.
Thank you, but I will come back to the question of the democratic values because we haven't heard yet the reaction by Professor Hoffman. So Professor Hoffman, please.
Thank you very much. So as a lawyer, I can state that it will affect partly the democratic values and especially the centralization, decentralization manner. So as I have mentioned, it has a two-sided effect because first of all, the centralization of the public services and the centralization of the answers to the pandemic could strengthen the executive branch, but it's very interesting because during the pandemic, the self-organizing of activities of the local communities have been strengthened as well, and therefore it cannot be predicted on the balance of this opposite effects of COVID.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to add that I think there are several danger and risk if you just think about that government collecting individuals, data on individuals, physical location and health status data, and once this data collection mechanism is established, it will remain it may remain after the pandemic is over. And also in Hungary, we have some regulation on some concerning the law against the misinformation concerning the pandemic, and who can decide whether it's misinformation or other things. So I think at least in Hungary there is a danger for further as the audience may know that we already have some restrictions on democratic institutions and values, and this time of pandemic may further restrict some rights and the circumstances. So many, of course, it's my personal opinion, but many people share this opinion in Hungary and have the fear. Of course, it's different than Germany, but so it shows that we cannot give a general answer, but the situation may be different country by country. So the next is a short question from Ganna Stepanova to Professor Hoffman. Do you think that is going to be further reduction in GDP after the second wave of the COVID crisis? So please.
So I'm not an economist. The data was provided by the Central Statistical Office of Hungary, but if we look at the legal regulation, there are focus which try to prevent the further GDP reduction, but the weak point of the Hungarian GDP is now the tourism, because the tourism has in the Hungarian GDP almost 10% wage, and actually the tourism is very, very concentrated in Hungary to Budapest and to the Balaton region. And in Budapest, the tourism was hit by the pandemic. And the second question is the planning of the development sources, especially the development sources from the European Union and from the national budget. So I don't know. I hope it will be a shortage, and the legislation try to answer to the shortage, but there are some risks. But sorry, I'm not an economist.
Okay, but I think the latest forecast by the Economic Research Institute is concerning the whole year is the around fall of 7 or 8%. So it means that very minor recovery in the last quarter of the year, but generally very strong fall in GDP. So I just have a last question to all the panelists from Dr. Coxell. A key topic, the dichotomy of health versus economy, but every winter or hospital collapse because of the flu. Is there a comparison of epidemiological and management threshold of flu versus COVID-19 to produce national lockdowns? So that's I think we can formulate the question in a broader sense. How do you see the economy, health versus economy, and what is your forecast in the remaining part of the year, taking into consideration the flu coming? So, Professor Göksel?
Yeah, actually, a minute ago, I tried to answer the first part of the question. So for the economy health part, once again, yeah, both of them are very important. Of course, the health is the most important thing. But when the economy is going down or contracting a lot, then many people actually in Turkey said that you should open up, for example, restaurants or some hotels and so on. Then after beginning from March until mid-June, actually health was dominating as in terms of policies, health was dominating the economy part. But after mid-June, due to the reasons which I said, the economy part was dominating the health issue. But I'm not sure what's going to happen in winter because, as the professor said, the flu is coming, and because of that reason, maybe some other policies, health policies can dominate the economy policies. And that is also, of course, affecting the economy adversely, of course. But we should, after this winter, hopefully, we expect to recovery begin in 2021, not in 2020, of course.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kaiser.
Yeah, if you allow, I found one question by Florian Lemken. would you allow that maybe?
Yes, please, shortly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we are
yeah, of course. He asked, did measures decreed by Jens Spahn, which measures decreed by Jens Spahn are suspected to exceed the framework granted to him? And my answer is actually the measures decreed by Spahn are not suspected to exceed the framework. Instead, it's the framework itself that is suspected to concede the constitution. So the reason for this is Spahn is entitled by the Federal Infections Protections Act to deviate from statutory law by decree in the health area. And that is highly problematic from a German constitutional point of view, because decrees are in the norm hierarchy below statutory law. And so while we say that it's permissible in as an exception, the framework is formulated too broad. So that's the problem. So it's not the measures Spahn has taken. Yeah, it's the framework itself that is problematic.
Thank you. Professor Hoffmann?
I would like to thank you for the questions, because I tried to answer it and Professor Orosz tried to answer it as well. We have the same pattern like in Turkey. During the first wave in the springtime, health issues were the more important. The lockdown was relatively strict. But now, after the end of the emergency, and especially in summer, we have very, very liberal regulation on pandemic situation. Now it's a bit more strict, but it's compared to another European countries, these restrictions are not very strict. But the legislation is focusing now mainly on the restart of the economy. Of course, they try to manage the pandemic, but the main issue now in Hungary is the restart of the economy.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, it's time to close our session and webinar. So I apologize to all those participants whose questions haven't been answered, but maybe UNICA will solve that they will receive through the email. And I would like to thank to all the panelists for the presentation and answer, the discussion. I think we have had a very interesting and thought-provoking session, and also the whole webinar highlighted some of the burning issues of this very, very complex health, social and economic phenomena, the COVID-19. Just to mention a few from the first session, that testing is not just a medical issue, but a social issue, and the trust is very important in the effectiveness. And also, I like so that the role of art is very important in developing resilience and to survive and restore the balance after the pandemic. And of course, it was very interesting and deserve further thought that we have different patterns in countries. So the pattern of the course of the pandemic is quite different, for example, in Germany and Hungary. And it has to do a lot with the attitude of the government, and also the attitude of the population and the interaction between them. So it deserves more research and thought. And of course, the question that were we prepared, I mean, countries, government, population, and the answer is no, but also an interesting issue that maybe some of you know that countries did have a national pandemic strategy prepared in 2009 in the time of the SARS pandemic, and it was initiated by the WHO. So all the countries had, and it needed just updating, and some countries like Germany updated immediately this national pandemic plan, and some countries, for example, Hungary, just did not remember at all, and still we do not have a pandemic strategy. So we have several interesting aspects, and one of them is that we can see signs of opportunities also for better, such as for green recovery and stronger solidarity. And also, on the other hand, we can also see signs of gloomy trends, such as further increasing inequalities and poverty, and risk of misuse of digital technology, and risk of unjustifiable state control on the horizon. It needs great efforts, cooperation, and also new ways of thinking by every stakeholders to be able to seize the opportunities and tackle the risks. We as researchers and teachers and universities also have to do our best. I wish all of you strength and good health to this, and so hereby I close the webinar. I don't know, Vicky, do you want to say anything to the audience and participants?
Yes, I would like to thank you for all the speakers and also the participants, also for the organizing or the organizer team. And I'd like to kindly invite you to fill in our evaluation survey. We just put the link in the chat, and we will also send you this through email. And we'll certainly share the presentations and also the recording. So feel free to disseminate it to your friends and colleagues. Thank you very much to all of you, and have a nice afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you, all of you. Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, and sorry for my time expiration.
It was perfect. Don't worry. Goodbye.